I have a podcast title.
Oh, good, because we need one of those, I'm told.
Brandon whinges about movies.
That sounds good.
Okay, because we are going to whinge about Rotten Tomatoes today.
You know, the first time I ever encountered the word whinge was back when you and I ran Time Waster's Guide.
Uh-huh.
And somebody in the forum said whinge, and I went into this big rant about how he spelled wine wrong, because I didn't know whinge was a word.
Oh man, Time Waster's Guide. This is tangent already. We were ahead of our time because you know how useless influencers try to get free stuff all the time now? Right? Like that's a thing that is a big deal.
It is the choosing beggars of the internet.
Yes, all these influencers, we were those influencers in the early 2000s.
With the two key caveats that A, we didn't actually influence anybody, and B, we did, to be fair, actually provide reviews of the products.
We did review the products.
Photograph ourselves next to them.
Yes, we actually used them and stuff, but I don't think a lot of these influencers actually influence anyone either.
Well, that's true.
All right, so what I have done this week is from the last discussion we had, was really curious if there were other films that I thought were classics or excellent movies that deserved more praise than they got. And so what I did is I started looking on Rotten Tomatoes for the Rotten Tomatoes scores. And of course, Rotten Tomatoes is great and awful at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Because in one way, it boils everything down to a single number for us, which is super useful. And on the other hand, it boils everything down to a single number, which is enormously reductive and a stupid way to determine if a movie is a good movie, right?
Yeah.
One of the problems with Rotten Tomatoes is that a movie that everyone likes okay will score a really high score, because if everyone gives a movie a 6 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes, that would be 100% Rotten Tomatoes score. And if everybody gave the movie a 5 out of 10, then that is a 0% splat on Rotten Tomatoes, right? Because it counts the number of critics who gave a thumbs up and the number of critics who gave a thumbs down.
It's a pure pass-fail.
Yes, and so there is that problem. Usually, I've found it's decent, right? At telling me what kind of movie
Well,
this
and
movie is.
especially when you give it the standard 20% bump if it's in a genre you like.
Yes, exactly. So I have collated a list here. I actually have a top 6. It probably should be a top 10, but it's a top 6. And the top 6 is my rating for a movie compared to the Rotten Tomatoes score. And these are the ones that I saw that had the biggest disparity. But we're going to start with the disqualifications. Disqualification number 1 is Speed Racer, because we already talked about it.
And that one's super low on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it's actually not as bad as I remember. It's like a 42% or something like that, or whatnot. But, you know, I love Speed Racer, but Brandon whinges about Speed Racer should not be the title of this podcast. So that one's disqualified.
No Speed Racer.
No Speed Racer. Also disqualified are all the movies in the above 50%. Like,
yes. Their cutoff is 60.
Yeah. But yeah.
But I feel totally happy cutting off anything above 50.
I just found a ton in the 50% to 60% range that I thought, this deserves a 7 out of 10, not a 5 out of 10, all right? And so it was kind of hard. And it also kept me from going and looking at, like, I wanted movies that were critically panned in some way that I like, rather than saying Return of the Jedi deserves to be 3 percentage points higher than it actually is. This is a tragedy, right? So
it feels incorrect in some way.
Yeah.
To not get into the most ridiculous weeds if we're having this big whingy thing, but
so here are some disqualifications that were on that list that we could still talk about that are disqualified. Knight's Tale, 59%.
Which is atrocious.
Yes.
Knight's Tale is amazing, and Knight's Tale holds up.
It does.
20 years later,
like,
it is
I would give Knight's Tale a 9 out of 10. The only complaint I have about Knight's Tale is that I really like the side characters better than I like the main characters. But it's a shallow complaint because the main character is kind of vapid jock guy and vapid, like, queen lady. And they kind of play their vapid roles really well, right? It's really well done. It's intentional. They're playing a jock and a cheerleader, essentially. I could have used a little more depth, particularly for her character, but 9 out of 10. So
You know, I did find myself, because we showed this to our kids a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the princess a lot more on this rewatch than I did originally for some reason.
Well, here's the thing. She's a good match for him. Like,
Yeah.
the blacksmith is a more interesting, better character who
Mm-hmm.
is a bad match for the protagonist. And so when I was younger, I'm like, oh, he should have gotten together with her.
Clearly.
That's because that's who I would have picked, not who he necessarily would have or should have picked. Right?
Now, it's important to point out the blacksmith in
Mhm.
Knight's Tale.
Yes.
That's Laura Fraser. That's John Cleaver's mom in my movie.
Oh, wow. Nice,
Yeah.
nice connection there.
Yep.
All right. So also disqualified, The Mummy, Brendan Fraser, 61%.
61. So
Yeah.
barely fresh.
Barely fresh.
But The Mummy is phenomenal.
Yeah, Mummy's great.
That is a fantastic action adventure.
What would
In
you
fact,
give The
one
Mummy?
of the one of the best modern action adventure movies, I
Yeah.
would say.
It is better than Indiana Jones 4 by a long shot, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, but that's a very low bar to
That is
clear.
a low bar.
Hardly fair comparison. I am, in general, and we've talked about this in the past, an apologist for Temple of Doom, and I still
Yes.
think Mummy is better than that, too.
Yeah, I would agree. So I sometimes want to talk about how you rank and rate movies, right? I feel like it's hard to say on those two because I feel like the different directors achieved what they were trying to do well, right?
Mm.
A movie I'm going to rate low is one where a director tries to do something and fails, or, filmmakers together try to do something and fail. But I like The Mummy better than I like Temple of Doom, even though I am also a Temple of Doom apologist.
Yeah.
So 61% too low on that. And then the last one that was on my list of how can this be in the 50s is Spaceballs.
I know.
56%.
What is that doing down at 56?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, it's not the producers. It's not, Mel Brooks's magnum opus and things like that. And it's not Blazing Saddles, right? But it's fun and it's dumb.
Good. It's really good. It's got
Yeah.
some fantastic jokes in it.
Yeah.
It plays around with the nature of film, which is something that Mel Brooks does in general, but it's a smarter dumb movie than most dumb movies.
Yes. Yes, it definitely is. So there's my list of that disqualification. I have one more disqualification category if you want to hear about it.
Okay, I would love to hear about it.
This is movies that are legitimately terrible, but don't deserve to be as terrible as they are rated, right?
So, like, if something is 30 and you think that maybe it ought
No,
to
no.
be a 45, you're
These
not
are-
going to count it?
I only have 2 on this list right now because I'm like, I could go on forever on this list. But these are both lists that are under 5% that really deserve to be in the 30s or 40s, maybe the 20s, right?
I would love to hear what these are.
So Battlefield Earth is a 3%. Battlefield Earth is a bad movie, but Battlefield Earth does not deserve to be below Manos: The Hands of Fate, right? It just does not. It doesn't deserve that.
I have not seen it, so I cannot
Okay.
comment.
It's a weird movie. Sometime we should just talk about Battlefield Earth because it is bad. I give it a 2 out of 10.
Feels like I would have to watch it in order
Yeah.
to do that, which
Yeah, you don't want to have to do. So
yeah.
The other one is, now this one I will legitimately recommend even though it is bad. This is a 4 out of 10 maybe a 3.5. It's
Okay.
Wagons East, John Candy's last film.
Oh,
Now, it has John Candy in it. Granted, he didn't finish filming, and so they had to reuse shots of him twice in the film, which is just, I can't believe they had the guts to do that. The same scene they used twice of John Candy. There's a scene where he pours out his alcohol and decides to shape up, and they put it both as the climax of his character and the start of his character because he died before the film was finished. And you can definitely see they had to do a lot of work there. There are a lot of cringeworthy jokes that do not land. But John Candy is delightful even in that film that is a bad film. And I just can't help wanting it to be, okay, like I said, a 3 out of 10, a 3.5 maybe,
Yeah.
if you're being generous. But it's so fascinating to watch them try to finish a film. So if you don't know the premise of the film, it's a bunch of people who went west during pioneer times, yeah, and got there and found out it sucked and decided to all
Decided to go
go
back.
the other direction.
That's a
and pass.
delightful premise.
It is a great premise. There's a scholar guy who's like, I thought I would come out and educate these ruffians, and lo and behold, no, I can't. They used my brilliant books that I wanted to sell to them as toilet paper and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so they are riding east while everyone else is riding west. And like I said, it's not great, but John Candy is great. And he still works in the film. And it's at a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That is ridiculous.
Yes. So,
That
but
should not be there.
these are disqualifications because I'm like, it's still a bad movie. You still probably don't want to see it unless you're fascinated by the idea of you love John Candy and you want to see a movie that was finished using the same footage twice. Like that amuses me to no end. But parts of it are not even good, bad movie because the bad comedy just is excruciating, right? Comedy that doesn't land is you can laugh. Really, I can at least at sincere and enjoy sincere attempts. Like my favorite bad movie, I think I've mentioned it before, is the 1990s Fantastic Four, which I love that movie because it was made really cheap by a famously cheap filmmaker to keep the rights, but the actors didn't know, and they tried so hard. And you guys should watch this movie. They try so hard. It is the best Fantastic Four movie by a wide margin. But it's like you feel bad for these poor people who think they are launching a superstardom in the post Michael Keaton Batman world, and no one has told them that no one's going to see this movie. But anyway, all right. So this brings us to Brandon's list of movies in the 40s or below that he would rate much higher.
Much, much higher.
Much, much higher. And that deserve, to be legitimately seen by people. And they're rated kind of on a scale of by how much of a travesty I think it is. So the bottom few are less of a travesty, and the top ones are bigger travesties.
Okay.
All right?
All right. So we're getting increasingly more unjust as we go through the list.
So number 6 is Waterworld.
Well, you are speaking my language because I am a diehard Waterworld fan.
I didn't know that about you.
I absolutely am. It at the time was the most expensive movie ever made, and everyone, threw a giant fit about it. Today, it wouldn't even crack the news cycle. It's such a good movie.
It is an excellent movie. It is a mix of Mad Max, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in cool ways. Like Mad Max jet skis, that's fun, right?
Yeah.
But it takes itself just the right amount of serious to be an epic fantasy premise. And it works. Like, Kevin Costner sells it. He thinks he's giving an Oscar-worthy performance. He may or may not be, but he sells that story.
Well, and I am going to take it a step further and say, everyone out there who thinks that Brandon and I are insane, you have to find the director's cut that was released on TV a couple of years later.
Yeah.
Because it adds 20 or 30 minutes, and suddenly everyone has a character arc.
I like the movie in the cinemas, but the director's cut is even more superior. Like when you get to director's cut, you're like talking 8 out of 10 for me. And, maybe even an 8.5 for that movie, right?
Yeah. And this is not something that I love, ironically, because it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely enjoy it.
No, it's good.
It's been added to either Netflix or Prime Video recently, and I'm so excited to be able to show it to my kids. And, it doesn't have incredible characterization, although, like you say, Kevin Costner just sells it as well as he can. But just the visuals of it, the world that it creates, it tickles me.
Favorite
it delights
scenes
me.
for narrative stuff, like it opens somewhere, one of the early scenes, I can't remember if it's the first one, it might be the first one, is him working all of this hand-cranked machinery and stuff on his ship. Just, it's a lot of effort. It feels like it takes forever. It probably only takes like, a minute and a half or 2 minutes. But in film terms, for someone not speaking and running between these machines and trying to get this thing going, and then a little bit of water comes out of his machine and he drinks it.
And specifically, it started with him peeing into a cup.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. You're right.
The opening establishing scene of that movie is him drinking his own purified urine.
Yeah. But the way that world builds for us, the fact that effort is what you need to go through to get some pure water, and he's willing to do it, and that they have these mechanisms in place that you can do this unpowered without, electricity. That's just a really brilliant show that shows a ton about the world and gives kind of a tonal promise. This world is grungy and dirty, and just a really great scene.
That movie came out I want to say it was either right before or right after my senior year of high school. And then after my freshman year of college, I went down to California with a bunch of friends and we went to Universal Studios, and the movie was recent enough and they had invested enough money in it that there was this enormous live Waterworld show at Universal Studios.
Oh, how was it?
And it was gargantuan and it was so over the top.
I noticed you didn't say good.
Well, because all I remember about it was that, and this was back before digital cameras. So I had a film camera and I used an entire roll of film just taking cool pictures of the jet skis and the explosions and stuff. And my girlfriend was in one of the shots and she was so mad at me that I blew an entire roll of film on live action Waterworld stunt show.
Do you still have those pictures?
I wish. I don't know where they are.
Oh man, that would be an awesome thing to have listed in the liner notes, or Dad's pictures of Waterworld.
Dan's pictures.
Man, yeah.
And it was so great because as she was showing me the pictures, I think she was mad because she's the one who paid to get them developed. And she was like, and here's another grungy explosion. And here's another grungy explosion. Oh, and here's a grungy explosion with me as human interest. And here we are with another grungy explosion.
How old were you?
Right after freshman year, so
okay,
18, almost 19.
That's kind of awesome. You remember back when taking pictures was a cost? You had to think about if you wanted to snap this photo because it was going to take up one of the few you had on your likely disposable camera at our age back then. And if you were going to have to then pay to get it developed, and
like this, you've only got 24 shots on this roll, and it's going to cost you money to see what any of them look like.
We have a mutual friend named Micah who Captain Demo from the Mistborn books is named after, and he's a photography major in college and an excellent photographer, did nature photography, and I was his lovely assistant on many an occasion. That's what he called me because he needed a lovely assistant to carry his camera gear across the deserts of southern Utah. And I remember the first time I went with him, and he had his camera set to, what do they call it in camera terms? It was where you bracket each shot, where it'll step it up in light and down in light for aperture or whatnot. You take a picture and it takes 3 shots every time.
Oh
boy. I just exposed a bunch of ignorance to the camera. I used to know what this was called, but it takes 3 shots. So
you were hired because you were lovely, not because you were a photographer.
Yeah, right. I could have starred in Knight's Tale, you're saying? But it took 3 shots, and then he was just snapping them like crazy. I'm like, how can you possibly take all these pictures? That's so much film. He's like, yeah, I'll probably fill 10 rolls today. And I'm like,
Yeah, that's crazy.
All right, do you have a movie you want to mention, or shall we keep going on Brandon's list?
Let's go with your list.
Okay.
First, because my list is structured a little differently.
Okay. All right. We'll do my list, and then if we don't get to your list this time, we'll get to your list next time. Okay. Number 5 on Brandon's list, in increasing order of how much of a travesty this is National Treasure at 46%.
Wait, the
Rotten
first
Tomatoes.
National Treasure?
First National Treasure.
The first National Treasure is wonderful.
Yes, it's absolutely wonderful. It shares some themes with The Mummy. I would probably rank The Mummy above it, but so did Rotten Tomatoes. But it's delightful. I really like Nick Cage. I think Nick Cage is none of those actors that just gives his 100% to roles. And what it allows him to do is elevate B movies to B+ movies. And just like when in that film where he's like, we're going to have to steal the Declaration of Independence, you're just on board. You're just like, yes, you absolutely need to steal the Declaration of Independence, Nick Cage. Let's do it.
That's the only possible way to solve this problem. And it takes him like 10 minutes.
Yep.
Why didn't anyone else think of this?
And then there's like hidden words on the back of the Declaration of Independence. It's what I wanted the Da Vinci Code to be when I read the Da Vinci Code.
Well, and wasn't it kind of made in response to the Da Vinci Code, or am I getting the time wrong?
I don't know. It definitely has that same air of sincere adventuring in the modern world rather than Indiana Jones archaeological adventuring, right?
Yeah, my assumption, and I don't know what studio executive made what choice, my assumption has always been that it was made because someone was like, the Da Vinci Code, but fun.
Right.
Let's do this and make it enjoyable.
I mean, that was Clive Cussler's entire career, I believe.
Yeah.
But of course,
Speaking of which,
predates the Da Vinci
Sahara
Code.
is
Yes.
actually rated not nearly as high as it should be.
Well, what is Sahara?
I don't remember. Let me
Sahara?
look it up real quick.
Yeah, look up Sahara, because Sahara is another excellent movie. Matthew McConaughey is one of these actors that we all, myself included, kind of discounted for a long time, despite the fact that he was very watchable and enjoyable.
So here's my theory. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey and Nicolas Cage have opposite trajectories as actors,
Oh.
going from respectable to ridiculous, and they actually cross at the Sahara National Treasure nexus point.
Yeah.
Sahara's a 38%. That's a travesty.
That deserves to be on my list. That can be on your list.
Good night.
That's probably is that a better film than National Treasure? Probably
no, because I do think Sahara drags a little bit.
Okay. And National Treasure is just more ridiculous than finding a boat in the desert somehow, right? And okay. That probably would be on my list if I had noticed it.
Yeah.
All right, number 4 on Brandon's list. Are we ready for this?
I am so excited.
Equilibrium. Christian Bale. It is at 39% on Rotten Tomatoes, and this movie is amazing. It's amazing pulp schlock, but it is amazing. Were you there when we watched it?
Yes, I was there when Alan made us watch it.
I thought it was Ben.
No,
it was Alan?
This was Alan.
Okay.
Who thinks that it is wonderful. No, it wasn't. It was Ethan Scarsdead.
That feels like such a Scar movie. That's of course, because Scar is our friend. He's
or maybe I'm just remembering because we watched it at his house.
No, that sounds absolutely like a Scar movie, because part of why I love Equilibrium is the pulp aspect of it. It's just so over the top ridiculous. And Scar tends to take those sorts of things very seriously. Right? 2 movies that did not make my list, but were in honorable mentions or disqualifications, was Battlefield Earth, which he took me to see because he saw it and said, "You need to see this. It's better than everyone says." And the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Oh, which is super low.
Which is
like
super low
12 or
and
something.
is kind of bad, right? Like I actually had a list of, oh no, this movie is actually bad. Like there were a bunch that I'm like, oh, I have fond memories of it. Then I remembered I have fond memories because it was bad and I enjoyed it being bad, but not that it is where it deserves to be.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of movies that I enjoy despite their being bad, and maybe that's a topic for another day.
Rain of Fire was actually on that list of mine, Matthew McConaughey. It's at a 42%, and that's probably a good place for it. Despite me loving it, that's a solid rating. You give it about 20% bump because it's a genre I love, and it's a 6 out of 10. And
there you go. And that's where it deserves to be.
Where it deserves to land. But let's talk about Equilibrium.
Isn't Christian Bale also in Reign of Fire?
He is.
Speaking of Equilibrium.
Wow. Intersection of.
There we go. It's like we planned this.
And they both treat it so seriously. But I'll tell you, the Reign of Fire riff tracks is pretty awesome. Were you there? We watched that.
I might have watched that with you. Because I know I've seen Reign of Fire twice, and I can't imagine any other reason why I would have watched it a second time.
The movie posters for Reign of Fire were one of those things where the marketing was better than the film. Because it was like Apache helicopters flying through the air and dragons. And turns out that's kind of, it is military versus dragons, but it is post-apocalyptic military barely keeping their military functioning, fighting dragons, and not quite,
I really enjoyed the post-apocalyptic part of it. Speaking of Matthew McConaughey, watch Reign of Fire solely for the shot of him leaping off of like a grain silo with 2 axes ready to just murder a dragon.
I think it's a castle
right
even,
up close.
or fortifications.
Something like that. He's like, I'm going to kill this thing with my bare hands. And then
a genius scene. That's how it is a genius subversion of expectations by playing into actual what should happen. I like that. But there's one actual, I'm joking about that scene. Like, it's fun, but it's camp fun. There's one legitimately brilliant scene, and that is the Star Wars retelling.
Oh, yes.
Remember that?
Yes. That's
Mhm.
what makes me love post-apocalypse,
Yeah.
is when they do that kind of thing.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
they are equating, Star Wars with the Epic of Gilgamesh or Hansel
Yes.
and Gretel, or this is the kind of story that our culture is going to tell its grandchildren
Mhm.
around the campfire in 200 years after the zombies have risen.
There's a ton of those in the Skyward series, my YA series, because it's far future and scions of Earth and remembering, and just that
Mm.
all of those stories are in some way inspired by watching Rain of Fire and being like, wow, that's a really great way to world build and to build a connection between us and the characters at the same time. Puts me right in this place, understanding that my time has become lore and mythology to their time because of, loss of technology and things.
Well,
So
and that's such a better way of doing it. As much as I love Orville, I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Orville,
I
because you don't like
haven't,
TV shows.
I don't really like
And that's fine. But Orville and many, many others like it, Babylon 5 did the same thing. The people in the future, whenever the writers want to wink, wink, look pop culture, they'll have people watching old stuff. And it's always from the
Yeah.
70s, 80s, and 90s. And that's it. Like, those are the only decades that matter to the future, which calls attention to itself as an untenable gimmick because of how specific it is.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever looks back at the thing from our past that none of the audience remembers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what was it? Bill and Ted it was Bill and Ted 2, which is really great. We should talk about Bill and Ted sometime. But in Bill and Ted 2, they have their great musician come. They're doing a class at the beginning of it. If you haven't seen it, what's going on is the future people are doing a class on great like musicians from the past, and
Mhm.
they bring forward several musicians that weren't in the first film. So I think Beethoven was the first one film, so they get Bach and they get someone else, and they actually subvert this trope by getting someone past us who does, some weird atonal thing. But the person they get from our time is like the lead singer of Whitesnake or something like that. Like it's whoever they could get to be in their film. Adam,
awesome.
look up who that actually is playing himself. Like, I don't think it's actually the lead singer, but they're like, and the great musician, they don't get Michael Jackson because he wouldn't be in their film,
Mhm.
right? They don't get Billy Joel. They bring forward the lead singer of Winger, the great musician.
The greatest musician of the late 80s who would
Yes.
consent to be in our movie.
Yeah. And it's always just made me laugh because even as a kid watching the movie, I'm like, oh, that's all you could get, huh? Okay.
That's who you could get
At
for your movie.
least I recognize the name of the band.
Mhm.
So, but they probably would have been better off getting some indie darling who would be willing to be in the film, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't have cost you much to get
Who
Bjork
wouldn't have
in your
cost
movie.
you much. And then they went on to become later known as one of the formative people of this, but nope, it's Bill and Ted. So they get like whatever,
Well, they had to get a rocker of some kind.
the drummer of Twisted Sister or something like that. It's whoever they could get.
Oh,
We haven't even
man.
talked about Equilibrium. We have to go
No,
back and
so
talk about
Equilibrium is dystopian, and it clearly has delusions of real SF dystopian 1984 thought police, but so quickly loses all of that underneath these ridiculous action sequences.
Gun katas. Gun katas. So here's what you got to know. It's emotion is illegal.
Yes.
Having
You're not supposed
emotions
to feel
is illegal.
things.
You can't feel things, which is actually a really great dystopian premise.
Mhm.
If they hadn't used it, I could see an entire YA series. I mean, in some ways, you could even argue
sure
that the
there
Giver
is a YA series out there where
is a little bit like
emotion's
that.
illegal.
But yeah, emotions are illegal.
I
You
mean,
all
that
have
was
to-
Delirium. No one's allowed to be in love
right.
by Lauren Oliver. The fact that emotion is illegal, of course, means that everyone takes a pill so it suppresses their emotions. And there is a genuinely moving scene where the guy encounters, because, similar to like Fahrenheit 451, people go around burning books and stuff.
Yep. But in this, they
And
burn.
They burn all kinds of art.
Yeah.
And he finds an old recording of, I want to say, Beethoven, and plays it on like an old Victrola, because it's all that survived the purge, and hears music for the first time in his life. And it's incredibly well done. It's a really good scene.
Yeah. Some good, good
Yeah.
premise. And it's Christian Bale. Like, you're noticing a theme in these films that they are people who give great performances, even if perhaps the subject matter and film doesn't rise to their performance. Perhaps.
Yes.
So you're seeing what I like. And I really like people who take chances. Waterworld, one of the cool things is there was a ton put into that film. You can say it's Mad Max on water, but the world building is so much more than that, and the lore is so much more. And it's doing Avatar, right? Not the Airbender, but something like that. I really like it when films try things like this. In Equilibrium, I really like that they're like, you know what? This is pre Hunger Games. This is before dystopian hit its stride again, and and whatever echoes of pop culture resuscitation happen, and these sort of cycles and whatnot. And they're like, we're gonna make 1984.
Do this. Now, it was, if I remember, pretty concurrent within a year or so of V for Vendetta.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't know if that has any bearing on anything. Hollywood is very notoriously doubles premises between studios all the time.
Yeah, but then they said, 1984 needs gun katas. What is a gun kata, you may ask me, dear listener? Well, gun kata is martial arts you perform with guns. Not by hitting people with the guns. You just do some really cool katas, and you are trained to fire your guns at just the right time. And if you go through these katas, you'll just hit everybody, even though you're not looking.
Yeah.
Because,
because it's like all about the probability of where the attackers are going to be.
Human movement is deterministic, and if you follow these patterns, you will get them. And there is legitimately some awesome action. Like, there is a scene where Christian Bale kicks down a door into a dark room, completely pitch black, lands on the door in the darkness, and all you see are the muzzle flashes of his guns as he does gun katas, and then the lights come on and everybody's dead. And it's a great action scene.
Well, and I love how much they lean into the premise of this like deterministic gunfight. My favorite fight scene in it is one where he goes in and he rolls two gun magazines across the floor, and they're weighted so that they're standing up. And then he goes through, running around. The lobby scene from The Matrix, very obviously being name dropped. And then he runs out of bullets, and he is standing directly next to the two little things that he threw out because he knew exactly where he would be when he would run out of bullets. And so he's able to just pop the magazines out and stick the guns down on the other ones and keep going.
It's the lobby scene for The Matrix, except instead of walking on walls, he's doing yoga. It's true. He's just walking down the hallway, waving his arms and doing yoga and firing his guns every time he makes a yoga pose. I love this film.
I don't like it as much as you do, but I do remember it fondly. And where is it on Rotten Tomatoes?
It was like a 40-something. Let me see.
Yeah, that feels too low for
39. 39% for Equilibrium. Now, if I have to say, is this a legitimately great film? Like, Knight's Tale, I think, is legitimately great. The things it is doing are really cool. It's doing new things with cinema. But this gun kata stuff, maybe I'm stretching too far. This is Brandon whinges about movies. But if you look at it, gun kata stuff works because everybody has had the emotion and love of art ripped out of their life, and they've become mechanical robots. And so they will follow these patterns. They are deterministic because they no longer have emotions. And it actually fits the theme that gun katas work. Now,
is that a point that the movie ever makes?
No.
Okay,
no.
That's fine.
But, the director uses gun katas in his next two films, I believe, and they're much worse and didn't strike in the same way as Equilibrium did, despite trying very hard. And
I've been trying to think of the movie that visually reminds me of Equilibrium, and it's Gattaca.
Yeah, okay, the Keller palette and the grading and stuff like that.
And
You're right.
the super slick haircuts and everything.
Yep. But Gattaca is like a 10 out of 10 film, like legitimate piece of art. And this is a camp action film that Brandon likes. Those are two different things.
That's the thing, is like if you take The Matrix and Gattaca
and mash them
together into a slightly worse movie than either of its originals, you end up with Equilibrium.
Yeah.
And so just because you like its parents, it's worth checking it out.
Yes. All right. Number 3. We're into the hallowed number 3.
Okay.
This is going to be a controversial pick. I think this is Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
Okay. Which right off the bat, we know this is a genuinely awful movie that is immensely enjoyable.
It's not genuinely awful. It is secret genius.
Okay.
If you haven't seen Kung Pao Enter the Fist, It's a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. And there is one scene that is a 13% or lower, and it's he fights a cow scene. It was in all the trailers. It's terrible. It is bad CGI.
Mm-hmm.
It is almost, it doesn't ruin the movie, but you just skip that part. It's Odenkirk, but it's not the Breaking Bad Odenkirk. It's the other Odenkirk. So he bought the rights to a kung fu film, a Hong Kong kung fu film, bought the distribution rights, and then he Forrest Gump photoshopped himself into all the scenes and changed the story and recorded new dialogue. Steve Odenkirk.
Steve Odenkirk.
Yes. And this one actually is not a better film than the others on my list, but it has the biggest disparity, which is why it's number 3. It probably should be lower on my list because I would probably give it like a 6.5, maybe a 7, and it's a 13. It just had a huge gap, which is why I put it higher on my list. People are going to be laughing at me now.
The Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus is a short sketch's worth of jokes stretched into a full-length feature, which is about what I remember.
I really like interesting, innovative filmmaking, and the idea of photoshopping yourself into an entire movie and changing the storyline entirely. I mean, Woody Allen did one of these too, and I really like What's Up, Tiger Lily also for that same reason. And so maybe this is like one of those things Brandon really likes that lots of people don't, but not like when I saw the trailers for it, I was not interested in this film at all. It looked like a scary movie type bad spoof, right? And then I discovered the story of it. And then I watched it fascinated the entire time, laughing at some of the legitimately funny jokes and just being amused and amazed by the idea that he cut himself into this entire movie.
Yeah.
It is just so much fun to me. Okay, there are some cringe level jokes. There are definitely some, hey, this was made in the 90s or early 2000s when movie humor equates to look at dumb thing, right?
Yeah. It is less problematic than What's Up, Tiger Lily is.
Yes.
But I do think that the way that it is taking a movie specifically from a different culture.
Yes, and shopping himself in as a white savior figure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Makes it really
There's
fraught.
definitely some things there for sure. But, oh man, one of my favorite comedy scenes of all time is in this movie. And it's where the old master is walking with Steve Odenkirk. And there's like a guy doing martial arts, and the master's like, ignore him. We trained him wrong on purpose as a joke. And that one has stuck in my head all along. Just the framing of it, the beats of it, and how it works. It's my favorite joke from the film. The cow scene is terrible. just awful. And scenes with the love interest that I think he wrote in and also filmed into the film are also pretty bad. But the scenes where it's just he's there and it's Forrest Gump and a kung fu movie is happening and Steve Odenkirk is just there are delightful. All right, moving on to number 2. Number 3 is my controversial choice. That's my hot take. I don't think this one will be as hot a take, but it is, I think, a movie people dislike that I love, and that is Hook.
Hook?
Hook. 26% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay, and I'm going to assume that your controversial take is that it is too high and should be so much lower.
I really like Hook.
I don't understand people who like Hook.
I was hoping for one that you would dislike.
Oh, my word.
Why I like Hook. Robin Williams. I really like Robin Williams in the right role. Dustin Hoffman, right? And I love the premise, and I actually really like just how it's acted. I was shocked when I found out that people didn't like this film because I thought it was well beloved by the entire community. Like, I loved it.
See, when I was going through making my list, I was delighted to find it as low as it was and thought, oh, good. Other people hate this dumb movie too. The main reason I don't like it is because it has like 80 different emotional climaxes that are all filmed with more or less the same level of awe-inspiring music and wide puppy dog eyes.
My books? I'm exaggerating.
But you earn yours. That's different.
You read the books back when they were bad, and I did that. Elantris had that. It had like 5 different emotional climaxes, and I had cut like 3 of them after my agent's like, this is really a bad idea. So I can see that, but I just still love it.
And so many people do.
No, they don't. It's at 26%, and I think the audience score is bad too, right?
Well, let's look it up
Yeah,
because I know that the lists we were probably both looking at are specifically the critic lists.
Yes, this is the critic list. It was a notorious flop. Maybe people love it now. Maybe I'm not. Because number one on my list, I know, is going to be a non-controversial hot take that indeed is going to be the hot take that everyone listening to this
everyone
is
like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm excited to see that one. Audience score for Hook is 76%.
Okay, so it is not as hot a
gigantic disparity. Everyone loves this awful movie.
It's not awful. It's great.
You know, there's that moment in a movie where kind of everything comes together and the emotions are strong and the music swells and we have this kind of heartfelt realization that something important has happened and now we can move on. And usually there's like maybe 2 of those, and Hook seriously has 25.
Yeah, okay, that's one thing wrong with it. I listed 3 things that are great about it. Can you what else? What else is wrong with this film?
It's just dumb.
So is Equilibrium, Kung Pao, National Treasure, maybe Waterworld.
I remember the scene where the parents come home and they find the Hook mark scratched into the wall. That's a great scene. I'm not gonna say that it's not. But the movie for me is just unwatchable because of how self-important it is.
It definitely is self-important. They really did think they were making something that would become like Wizard of Oz level, right? And
I think everyone who makes a Peter Pan does that.
Yes.
There's this kind of weight of nostalgia and belovedness that Peter Pan just can't escape from, and it is always
pretentious.
Very pretentious, yeah. That's a good word for it.
Which is a really odd thing to think about, because I will absolutely agree that Hook is pretentious. Right? As pretentious as a film with Robin Williams in the pre-Robin Williams Takes a Serious Turn era, right? Because I think this is, maybe it's not before Dead Poets.
Kind of in the middle of it. I don't know if it was before Dead Poets. It was definitely after Awakenings.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to end this episode with Brandon's number 1. We're going to do Dan's list
I'm excited.
next time.
What is your number 1?
Number
the non-controversial.
Non-controversial. It's Three Amigos. Three Amigos is somehow
Three Amigos.
a 45% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I wish that I had drunk some water so I could spit it all over my iPad again. That's horrible.
Like, none of these movies that I've listed, except Knight's Tale. Knight's Tale I give a 10. I would give Three Amigos a 10 also. Now, again,
I would maybe a 9, but it would be so close.
I feel like, though that's an interesting thing. We're going to have to do a podcast. Sometime we'll do a podcast on this. People love to say, it's not a perfect movie, but, and that phrase has started to really dig into me, because I'm like, what does it mean to be a perfect movie? Three Amigos is, to me, a perfect movie. It is trying to do what it does at every point, and every moment is contributing to achieving what it's trying to achieve, and it does it just so well.
Well, and it doesn't waste anything. Even the weird little side things, like when they go on their fantasy quest and it lasts like 2 minutes, and you think, well, that didn't go anywhere, but it's so perfect, even though it is a weird dead end that doesn't go anywhere.
It marks the transition from the real world into the fantasy land.
Yeah.
And you could even argue that everything after that is happening in their heads, because it's where things go right for them. It's a delightful little moment of transition. I love it.
Yeah.
This is English major stuff. I'll try to get off of that.
No, I think I suspect that weird English major stuff applied to Three Amigos is probably why people are listening to this.
Even like if you want to say, as a kid, the turtle saying goodnight, Ned, at the end of that surreal little moment was the biggest laugh that I gave the entire film as a kid. The talking turtle, for whatever reason.
Frankly, it calls into question the integrity of Rotten Tomatoes as an institution, that this is only a 45, because it is at least, I don't know if I'd give it perfect, but 95. The whole My Little Buttercup scene in the bar.
Oh, so good.
Rarely has a comedic scene ever been so flawless. And my money.
With the payoff at the end, when the other guys come in.
Yeah.
And, right?
And then we don't see exactly what happens, but we know it's going to be awful.
Oh, no. They go in first, and then these guys. Yeah, sorry. It's a payoff to a joke that was set up, is what I mean. Yeah.
Maybe the funniest line that has ever been written for a comedy is, "So, old woman, so like the wind." I don't know why that is as funny to me as it is.
So,
but that's hilarious.
Rather than just like quote cool lines, though, I want to talk about like this film because I love it. And I think that people disregard comedies as all being the same, particularly this kind of comedy, which has a mix of slapstick and a mix of old vaudeville and a mix of wordplay. And that's why we lost these films, right? This is why we don't have Airplane getting made anymore. And we don't have Three Amigos getting made anymore, is because this level of genius in comedies. Yeah.
I'm going to argue with Three Amigos not getting made anymore because off the top of my head, Bug's Life and Galaxy Quest.
How old are those? Those are both films from the
90s. That's true.
Those predate we are going to do references with slapstick instead of jokes with slapstick as our comedic film.
You know, you mentioned earlier the Scary Movie franchise, and maybe this is unfair, but I credit that group and those movies for kind of killing the stupid funny movie genre that used to be so smart and then stopped being smart. And we had the whole row of spoof movies. You know, Not Another Teen Movie is actually pretty good, but like disaster movie, scary movie, all of those, they fall into that trap you mentioned of, here's something gross, laugh at it. Or here is a thing you've seen before that's going to substitute for a joke because I am not clever enough to write a joke. And so, whereas we used to have this really brilliant stuff, like one of the things that I love about Three Amigos is, after I moved to Mexico and learned Spanish and came back and watched Three Amigos again, there's a lot of Spanish in it, and it's really good. And somebody took the time, and maybe it was just the actors, to like try to make this feel real.
So let's compare your favorite line of that to why I think that these kind of spoof movies just are kind of... So they will just say, now we're imitating the scene from Titanic where someone is standing and says, "I'm the king of the world." And it's a thing you recognize, and it's funny because the guy does it maybe in a little goofy way. Now, what makes your line work so well is this is also a reference to many scenes you've seen before, and someone needs to use their skills in a way, that is going to save the day. But it's ridiculous because she's sewing a costume, a Three Amigos costume, which is goofy and dumb, but they are treating it seriously. So the joke is, hey, all of the stuff you've seen before, we are inverting it. We are playing with it. We're lovingly teasing at it in a way that you get to put together, and the actors are playing it serious. So the Three Amigos works because the actors play it serious the entire time. Same reason that a lot of that era of comedy work. Top Secret and Airplane and Police Squad, which is stronger than the Naked Gun films, the television show was, and this one all are in the same sort of category of, we are going to take our comedy seriously, and they're just outrageously
well, I mean,
funny.
and that was Leslie Nielsen's entire career.
Well, it wasn't, because he's in Forbidden Planet, which I actually happen to really like. Have you seen Forbidden Planet?
I have. Years and years ago. I don't remember it well.
It's The Tempest, Shakespeare's The Tempest, as a science fiction film starring a young, I believe it's Leslie Nielsen. I could be wrong on this. If so, I apologize, but playing a straight role as the heroic captain.
Well, and that's who he was, which is why he got into Airplane.
Yes.
But since we're talking about Airplane, I want to point out another one from that, a joke from that. So, let's use the Titanic example, because that is something that shows up in a lot of these spoof movies is, look, you've seen this scene in Titanic. We're doing the same thing. Ha, ha, ha. And Airplane does that, but it does it in a different way. So, for example, there's a scene early on when the flight attendants are handing out coffee, and a guy takes a second cup, and his wife thinks, oh, John never has a second cup of coffee at home, which was just a direct reference to a popular coffee commercial from the 70s. That was the joke. And then later, when everyone in the movie gets sick, the husband ate the fish, and so he starts dying, and he throws up twice, and his wife goes, "Oh, John never throws up twice at home." And that's what makes it funny, is the ability to do something more than just a straight reference to a thing you've already seen.
So, what are we going to call the podcast? Do you have any guesses or any suggestions this week?
Well, Brandon has whinged about movies, so at least this is accurate. But next week is going to be Dan whining about movies. So I don't know.
Waterworld doesn't suck, the podcast.
Waterworld doesn't suck, the podcast.